Hello everyone and welcome back. This is the third and last little video for chapter 2 of our book. And I'm going to spend most of the time today talking about scanners. But before I do that, I would like to talk about the assignment operator. You see up here on, let's just take the one on line 25. This little guy right here, two short parallel horizontal lines. You've learned from math over the decades that this is the equal sign. And just for convenience sake, when we're talking about programming, we will often call it the equal sign and say I is equal to cast to the int and so forth. Or down here on line 27, just for convenience sake, we might say k is equal to 13 divided by 3. But in reality, we've taken that little math symbol and we've stolen it. And it's now no longer the mathematical equals sign that you've come to know and love. It is an assignment operator. And the way the assignment operator works is a two-step process, and the steps are independent. The first step is we take everything to the right of the assignment operator, the 13 divided by 3 here on line 27, and we evaluate that down to a value. And as I've said before, every value in Java has a type. In this particular case, 13 divided by 3 is an int type. So once we have a value, and 13 divided by 3 is going to be 4, we take that value and we copy it into the memory associated with the variable on the left of the assignment operator. There can only be one thing to the left of the assignment operator, a single variable. Now in this case, the type of the variable k is declared to be an int, which means it stores int values. And the right side produces an int value, so that copy just takes place and everything's fine. If we had something else going on, for instance here on line 23, 5 times 8, both of those are int values because of the way I've written them, and 5 times 8 is going to be int 40. D, if we go back up, was declared to be a variable holding values of type double, and so we take that int 40 and we widen it to be a double 40 value, and that's what we store in D. Now this two-phase or two-step process in doing the assignment operator means that we can do things such as I is equal to I plus 1. Now mathematically that makes no sense at all, but let's go through our two steps and see what happens. Up here, let's see, on line 25, we previously set I to 40 and then cast that to an int because it was double. So I is going to be 40, and I evaluate things to the right side of the assignment statement. I, which is 40, plus 1, which is 41. Perfectly reasonable thing to do. You'll notice I never look at the left side of the assignment statement in step 1. But now I have a value 41 arising from the right side of the assignment statement. I can now go to the memory associated with the variable I, and I can put 41 in there. It doesn't matter what was there before. I blow it away. Whatever it was is no longer there because I've just put 41 in that little piece of memory that I call I. So this is how this course is not math. The assignment statement, as I said, we've stolen the little equal sign graphic and we've turned it into an assignment operator, and we evaluate the right side of the assignment operator down to a value and then copy that value into the one and only variable to the left side of the assignment operator. So if you'll keep that in mind, assignments will go a lot easier. It's a fundamental understanding that you have to have in programming. Otherwise, things like line 35 will never make any sense. So now let's get to the scanner object. Scanner is the way we do input from input streams, which can be files or the keyboard in Java. And to do that is called a scanner. I have to give it some identifier. Some people use the word input, some people use the word scan or scanner. Some people you could use anything you want. I'll just call mine keyboard. And you'll just sort of memorize this incantation for creating a scanner. Now you notice this is not compiling, and when I hover over the error, Java should tell me that it can't find the scanner class. And it should offer to import it for me. Scanner cannot be resolved to a type. Fine. If you'll remember earlier when we looked at the Oracle Java API online, there were lots and lots and lots of classes delivered with the Oracle Java environment. For performance reasons and for confusion reasons as well, the compiler requires that we tell it exactly what classes we're going to be using there. And I want the scanner from java.util. Java.util is a package which is described in the textbook, and I'm not sure what happened there. Package equals directory structure. We won't be going into those very deeply at all, but there's my suggested fix. And I will pick import scanner from java.util. And you will see up here at the top, I now have an import java.util.scanner. This is Java's rough equivalent to the pound include that you might know from C. So now I can use this scanner. This is an object. I can use this scanner to read from the keyboard. Now it's polite to put up a prompt to give the user some clue as to what's going on. So I will say system.out.println, enter an int. And I can say I is equal keyboard.nextInt. You'll notice this is my variable, which I declared up here on line 38. And the dot is the member access function. And nextInt is called a method. It's the same thing that we would see in that called functions in C and C++. In some other languages, they're called subroutines or procedures. There's even one where they're called signals, and I'm sure there are a host of other names for the same concept. But it's exactly the same concept. And I can tell by looking at this that nextInt is a method because this open and close parenthesis. All method calls need a parameter list. I can put parameters in there for some methods, such as on println. It takes this string, and up here on this println on line 34, it takes that expression, which it evaluates down to a string, and passes that to to the print line method, which prints it out. The next int method doesn't take any parameters, but I still have to have a parameter list. And so at this point, I could do something like system.out.println I, and this is going to read an int and print out that int. So it's not going to be terribly exciting, but I will get to put something in from my keyboard. And this machine is a little slow, but there's my prompt down here in the console region. It says enter an int, and I'll enter 42 and hit enter, and it prints out 42. There are 3 basic methods that you will use most often to read from the keyboard, and a 4th that you will not use very often. I'll just very, very briefly mention it. And I'm going to modify my prompt up here. Enter an int, a double, and a string. So next int will read my int. I can say d is equal to keyboard.next double to read my double, and I can use my string variable s up here from line 32 and say s is equal to keyboard, and the method name there is just next. So let's go on and run this, and then we'll talk a little more about what's going on. There we go. Enter an int, a string, and a double. So for my int this time, I'll enter 13, and it turns out it doesn't matter if I enter these on the same line or on different lines. They need to be separated by white space, and I'll talk about white space in a moment. But I'll hit enter, and I'll put in 3.1415926, and then I'll just give it a space character, which is perfectly good white space, and I'll say Jack is barking. And you see, this is why we run things and program in small chunks. The only thing I printed out was the int. So let me try again. If we had gone 2 hours from now, I would not have remembered what I was doing, and this would have been a much more difficult bug to find. So we try again. And here we go. This time, what was it? 13, 3.1415926, and Jack is barking. So those were the values put into those particular variables, and you can see I can just print them out. And white space is one or more enter keys, new line characters, spaces or tabs or form feeds, and it can be any number of that stuff, and it can be in any order, any mix whatsoever. But a character is white space, 100 characters and 15 new lines and 10 tabs are all one bit of white space. So if I run this again and throw in lots of white space, 13, and I'll throw in a bunch of spaces, a couple of tabs, a couple of new lines, and 1.3, a bunch of spaces, several tabs, several new lines, and finally a character, one space, and another string. You see that I only got out the first word. That's because next reads a contiguous string of characters with no white space. The white space before the H, after the 3 and the 1.3, and before the H and the hello was ignored. It delimits the double from the string. And the white space after the O, that space character, broke the next read because the next just read the contiguous HELLO, and the space there, which I had put in earlier, was just ignored because the program shut down. So that's basically how next int, next double, and next work, and that's probably what you should use most of the time. There is another method for reading input called next line, and I'll discuss that one later. It can get complicated, especially when you're trying to use it with next int, next double, and next. The other thing I do want to discuss about scanner are three more methods, and what they do is return booleans peeking into the stream coming up to tell you what might be there. For example, and I don't want to put that there. What I want to put here is system.out.println has next int will tell you if the next thing coming in from the keyboard is an int value. Has next double has next double peeks into the input stream and tells you if the next thing coming in is going to be a double value. And has next peeks into the string and tells you that another word is there to be read. And these will be useful when we get to loops and if statements. You can peek into the string and say, well, if the next thing I'm going to read is an int or a double, if the next thing in the input is an int or a double, then I know how to read it. And so let's run this, and we will see what the output is, and then I'll talk a little bit more about what these methods are actually returning. Enter an int, a double, and a string. Well, I don't have to enter them all at the same time. So I can enter 3, and so it's waiting now on the line 43 for the keyboard to say, does it have a next double, or does it have a double coming in or not? The program doesn't know, we haven't entered it. So I can put 3.4 there, and yes, it did have a next double. Now I'm waiting on line 45 to see if something else is coming in. I'll put 22 there. And yes, it did have another word waiting for it. A number like 22 can be read as just a word, just characters, just like it could be read as an int. Now, of course, you can't add 1 to it in the same way that you can add 1 to the number 22, because you would get string concatenation on the plus sign instead of addition, but you can read it. Now, one other thing I want to talk about is you should treat these method calls. Remember, this is an assignment statement. That's an assignment operator on line 42. I assignment operator, the little equal sign. What's on the right of that assignment statement has to be evaluated down to a value. So keyboard.nextInt is just a funny way of specifying an int value. Keyboard.nextDouble down here on line 44 is just a funny way of expressing a double value. So I could, if I wanted to, say nextInt plus 5 here. NextInt is just an int. I can add 5 to it, and that's the value that will be assigned to I. So don't get hung up on methods that return values having to, and let me put in 1 and 1 and 1, and you see that I printed out as 6 because 1 plus 5 is 6. Don't get hung up on methods having to be on their own or anything like that. If they return a value, you can just use them as you would any other value. Let's go down here to my keyboard next, which is a string, and let me add 5 to that one. And let's run this again. And I'm going to enter 1, 1, and 1 to all of them. You see the int value coming out of line 42 is value 6, but on line 46, when I add 5 to the string, I get string concatenation, and so that string is now 15. 1, 5 is a string 1, 5, and not 6. So scanners are actually a very good introduction when we move on to chapter 3, because this new operator we saw on line 38 is how we create objects in Java. That is the only way of creating an object in Java. Now, sometimes we will write the new operator ourselves. Lots of times we'll write the new operator ourselves. Sometimes it will be written by somebody else and the object just pass back to us. You'll see that this line 38 is a declaration. A declaration is a type followed by the name. In this case, this is not a primitive type. Scanner is an object, is a class name. So it's in the technical literature, it's called a reference type. And keyboard is a variable, and I'll talk more about how we view those things in the next video, the one for chapter 3. But it is a variable, much like I and J and D and S are variables. And the new operator produces a new object. It creates an object of type scanner, giving it the system.in file, which is our keyboard. So a scanner object is created, a brand new one, and a reference, a pointer to that, is the value that I get from the right side of that assignment operator, and it's that pointer to that scanner object which I copy into the memory associated with my scanner variable. So that's going to be it for chapter 2. I hope this has helped, and we will proceed on to chapter 3, which we actually split over 2 weeks. The first week we emphasized dealing with objects that are supplied by Java, and I will talk to you for that video in a few moments.